Julie, I have this dream to celebrate my 30th anniversary at Sunlight of the Spirit. I said, who do you think we are, Make-A-Wish? But no, I thought about saying that, but I said, Susan, I would love to have you come and do that. And I have heard Susan's story, and she doesn't know that I know this, but she's responsible for for shutting down more bars and restaurants than I think Typhoid Mary. So she'll tell you more about that. Right, Susan? Okay, so without further ado, Susan G. from Columbia, Maryland.
Hi, family. My name is Susan. I'm a grateful alcoholic.
Hi, Susan.
Sober by the grace of God, some amazing sponsorship, the power of the 12 steps, and a little bit of my own effort since January 11th, 1989. So grateful. So that 30-year talk that I wanted to give is going to be the 33-year talk. COVID intervened, but we stayed steadfast and we're all here together. And if COVID's taught us anything, it's about family and friends and being together. So I'm so thrilled to be here. And the committee could not have been nicer. And I have a special hostess. And where are you, Jamie? She's so sweet. There she is. And Julie has kept in touch with me. And we all, it's a thankless job to be on a committee if you've ever done it. So I want to say thank you to all members. Oh, gosh, I have so much to tell you because I am so grateful to AA. I just have so much. I owe big. And I don't even know where to begin. Oh, let me begin with this. Have you heard the one about the guy who goes into the bar and the bartender comes up to him and says, we're having our grand opening special. It's all you can eat all you can drink of our draft beer, our house draft beer for $10. And the drunk says, I'll take $20 worth. By the sound of the laughter, I think I heard a few of you put a $20 bill and not expect change. But really, the ultimate story is more is better, right? And that's like the story of an alcoholic. I didn't know I was an alcoholic. I actually got to AA and was here for almost a whole year before I actually admitted it, accepted it for myself. But as I look back now, what a ridiculous thing, because this is the only disease that tells you don't have a disease. And I had alcoholism before I actually had my first drink. And it manifested in more of a lot of things. From Newark, New Jersey, which qualified me to be an alcoholic from the very start. And it's not too far from the truth. There was a town across the river called Harrison, New Jersey, and it was in the Guinness Book of World Records as having the most bars per square mile of anywhere in the country. And gosh, we were proud. And we used to do this thing called the pub crawl, and we try to go down a whole road of bars and just take one drink out of each of the bars and keep going. And even way, way back in the very early days of my alcoholism, I still couldn't just take one. Somebody would say, let's do a shot. And I would, and I'd end up throwing up in my sneakers, and somebody would scoop me up and take me home, and we'd do it all over again. But I'd like to go back to the beginning. I was raised by two alcoholics, and to say that was a really painful and confusing childhood would be setting it very mildly. My father was the vodka for breakfast kind of guy, and my mother was the more mad at him for drinking, so we're going to just be bitter and angry all day until we can finally drink after you kids go to bed. And also found out when I was 12 that my mother had a prescription pill problem. And I found that out because she had lost her purse or got stolen, one or the other, on a Sunday. And she was having a nervous breakdown in the kitchen. She was calling everybody that she could think of because of what had been lost in her purse. Not the license or the credit cards or the money. The pills were in there. And the pills, you couldn't get the pills on a Sunday. And that's when I put it all together. I also figured out my father was an alcoholic when I was 12. Up until that point, my father was the youngest of 8, and all the siblings were either alcoholics or married alcoholics, and we just stuck with the family for the most part. But I was given permission to go over to my girlfriends April and Michelle to sleep over. And when I got there that night and we went into the fridge to get soda, I looked in there and I said, man, is your dad going to be pissed? There's no beer in here. Because in my house, that was the thing. He would come home from work, and then he would look in there. My mother's job was to keep the beer in there, and if it wasn't in there, then he would start a fight with her and walk right back out the door. And so I didn't know everybody else's dad didn't do that when they came home. And imagine my surprise when her dad comes home and grabs a Pepsi and doesn't say a word. I just started thinking about it, and I started thinking about how my father drank all the time, and I realized that he was an alcoholic, and I made my mind up. And many of you might have said this too. It's never going to happen to me. I'm never going to be like him. And I'm here to report. You can want that all you want, but if you have the gene for alcoholism, if it's in you, it's going to show itself up. There's been stories where a person didn't drink until their 50s or 60s. I remember one story of a woman who didn't drink till she was in retirement, and she became alcoholic overnight. She hadn't drank her whole life, but it was there waiting for her. And I think that's the way I view alcoholism too. I think it's waiting for me too. And I haven't had a drink for 33 years, but it's still waiting for me. If I let my guard down, it can take me. So I didn't drink when I was a young teen because I made up my mind it wasn't going to happen to me. I smoked pot instead. Turns out that's not really helpful if you have the gene for addiction. My favorite description of addiction is phase 1, fun. Phase 2, fun plus problems. Phase 3, just problems. I hop, skipped, and jumped over fun and landed into fun plus problems like within a day, because it didn't really seem like a great idea to go to math class after smoking a joint on the way to school. So I just didn't go to school, and I got called on that, and I got in trouble. And then there was the idea of how I was going to be able to buy the stuff. And so I have, alcoholics are smarter than the average person, right? We all know that, but I would remind you not to say that in front of your Al-Anon friends, because they don't have the same opinion. But being as smart as I was, I had it all figured out, that I would tell my mom I needed a new pair of jeans, and then she would give me $5. I'm really dating myself, $5 to get the jeans. And I went to Bradley's to get the jeans. And Bradley's is no longer a business, but I swear that's not my fault. And I would get the jeans, I would steal the jeans from Bradley's, and then take the $5 and buy the pot. And eventually, I got caught stealing. And that was a problem. But I never really thought about stopping because of the problems. And this seems to be a common thread with alcoholics. You would think, if you tell this to the normal person out in the street, I had this problem and that problem, and because I drank and drugged, they probably say, well, why don't you stop drinking and drugging? And we don't really have that thought, because there's something inside of us. The big book calls it the RIDS, restless, irritable, and discontent. And I was that at every waking moment. And so this amount of time that I would smoke my joint, I would feel relief from that for a few hours. And then the day came when I was 16, and I went to my cousin Dolores' wedding. And I said to my mother, I need a new dress for the wedding. And she said, Dolores is not going to stay married more than 6 months. I'm not buying you a new dress. And she said, borrow a dress from Debbie, my friend, who was 3 inches shorter and 20 pounds heavier, which I did, and the dress looked terrible on me. And when you already have this restless, irritable, and discontent person who thinks so little of themselves, and you put them in a dress that's awful, I didn't even want to go to the wedding. But when I got there, I got seated next to Alvin, and my cousin Alvin was 18, and that was the age of consent in New Jersey at the time. And he said, are you going to drink? And I didn't want to seem like a big wuss in front of Alvin, so I said, Well, yeah, I was thinking maybe I'll have one. And he said, well, you got to ask your dad, because my dad was like the badass of the family and nobody wanted to mess with him. And I did ask my dad, and he said, just one. This starts my career in manipulation and any way that I could get over on this. So anyway, my cousin brought me a whiskey sour from the fountain. And I was about halfway down when I noticed the dress wasn't all that bad. It really swirled nicely on the dance floor, in which I was the best dancer there. And I was a sparkling conversationalist. You were so lucky to have me at your table. And all of this happened inside of the time that it took to drink half a whiskey sour. So what I decided was I would go up and refresh the drink, never letting it completely empty, and therefore I would be on the first drink 17 times later. And I got really, really drunk. And I threw up all over the place, and I went downstairs in the morning, and I had that feeling, let's go back and remember the hangover. Let's remember it. And it was like somebody had pasted a suede sweater onto my tongue, and I was dying of thirst. And I opened the fridge to get some juice out, and in the fridge was all these little splits of champagne, because they had given that as like a parting gift at the wedding, and my father, being the good alcoholic, went around to everybody's table and just gathered up like everyone that was there. And so I looked at that champagne, and I automatically felt like the urge to barf again in the kitchen sink. But you know what? A girl's got to do what a girl's got to do. I mean, I wouldn't drink whiskey sours again, but that was a small price to pay for that feeling that I had. And this is a story that you can tell your normal friends, and they will look at you like you have three heads. It's a story that if you told somebody who doesn't have alcoholism, they would never understand. And if I tell you, I know that you do. And if there is such a thing as an instant alcoholic, you're looking at it. I had no problem procuring and drinking to mass quantities of alcohol at every chance I could get. At the age of 16, I just, got a boyfriend that was 18. I left home when I was 18. I couldn't wait to leave home. It was all about my parents. They were horrible parents. I left a note on the table, goodbye, I'm leaving. And I went, and had $17 in my wallet that I had working my part-time job in a library in Columbia, and I don't know where I thought I was going to go or what I was going to do. And I think maybe at the age of 18, people might consider like what they're going to do for a job or a career. But I never, ever did. I never thought about it. And I think that you have to have a modicum of self-respect and self-esteem in order to think about what you might be able to do in the world. And if you don't have that, there's really no way. What's the use of thinking about it? So I found out about this rooming house in the next town over, Nutley, New Jersey. And they had a rooming house with a top floor at 7 rooms. And it was 6 old men and me. And we had 1 bathroom to share. I will not go into any details on that, but it was not pretty. And I just knew I needed to get a job. So I walked out of my rooming house one day, and I went down the road. The first place was a bank. I asked them if they had any job openings. They did not. Second place was a grocery store. And they took my application, but they didn't have anything right then. They would call me. And the third place was a 24-hour diner. And they had an opening for the 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. waitress, which was such a good job for an alcoholic, because at 3 o'clock in the morning, all my peeps came in the door, when all the bars started closing up, they would all come in. Now, we didn't serve alcohol in this diner, but it was rocking and rolling at 3 a.m. And I just made friends with everybody there, and we would just have a blast, and I made good money, and everything was honky-dory. And one day, these 2 guys come in to eat breakfast. They sit at the counter, and it's 6:30 in the morning. And they say, what time do you get off? I said, 7. They said, well, we're going up the street to the Nutley pub. Would you like to join us? And I said, 7 o'clock in the morning going to the bar. I said, well, if you were a secretary and you got off at 5 and we asked you to go for a drink, would you come? I said, sure. He said, this is just our 5 o'clock, which made perfect sense to me. And so every day for the next 2 years, I was at the Nutley Pub at 7 a.m. And you could, as you might think, there's a kind of a interesting group that gathers together at 7 a.m. And some of them were night workers like us, and some of them were like old man Phil, who I'll never forget. And I guess he was probably in his 60s, but you know, alcohol will do a number on you, so he could have been 30 and he looked 60. But he was waiting outside the pub door every single time we got there, waiting to get in there and get the drink. And John Cowan was the owner, and he would go around the bar first. He would take care of Phil, and would give him half a shot of whiskey. And Phil would try to get that first shot up. He'd get it up, try not to spill it, get that half shot in. Then John would wait a minute, then John would give him a 3/4 shot, and then the third one would be a full shot, and he'd get it down. And I'd start playing the jukebox and the dartboard and the shuffleboard, and I'd be drinking my drinks and not worried. And all of a sudden, Phil's on the floor, passed out, every day. And John Cowan would say, could somebody take Phil home? And somebody would say, sure, and they'd scoop up Phil and take him home, every single day. And by the time I was ready to leave that day, Phil was back. Because Phil couldn't not have alcohol in his body at that point, you know. He could not do it. And I think to myself, poor son of a bitch, Phil. If I ever get like that, somebody shoot me. And I wonder how close I got, you know, before I finally found my way to you. So this period of time was work at night till 7, drink all day till about noon or 1, sleep it off, go back to the restaurant at 7. And days off was horrible, because days off was like, what do you do during you're up the whole night? What do you do? Well, you just have to drink more. You have to pace yourself during the daytime drinking so you can get to the nighttime drinking. And then that screws you up for going back to work when you go. And it was just that horrible trying to make it work, you know, just trying to make it work, just trying to get through life. Survival, really. And that guy that asked me to go to the bar at 7 a.m. is sitting back there in the corner. He is my husband of 43 years. And boy, we are lucky that he is not telling you this story, because he has a different slant on it than I do. You know, we just were crazy. We were just crazy stuff. And he would just go along with everything that I did. And he wasn't an alcoholic, but he drank. And, you know, there would be times when he would be like, so you want to go? You getting ready to go? And I'd be like, oh my God, he wants to go already. I can't believe this, he wants to leave. And so I would say, well, how about like a couple more? And he'd be like, okay. And he'd go to the bathroom, and I would like say to the bartender, can I have a shot too this time? You know, trying to get to where I need to be, because he wants me to go home. I'm not ready to go home. I can't go home. And, you know, that kind of craziness, wow. That you could be that crazy at the age, I was 18 at that time, 18 and 19. That you could be that crazy and live that kind of life and still get to Alcoholics Anonymous at age 30 and not believe that you're an alcoholic, you know? It's incredible, isn't it? But I like to tell a little bit about the wedding. We did get married because he got a job in Maryland. I never heard of Maryland before. I had never been out of the beautiful state of New Jersey at the time, so he said he want to take his job in Maryland, so we would get married before we would go. And I was like, okay, you know, this is really good, because when we get married, I'm going to leave all these lowlifes behind. You know, this was the 80s, so drugs were a part of the story. So I'm sorry to speak about it at the podium. If I would have known that I was going to talk 30 years later, I probably wouldn't have done so much. But I have to tell you, I did a lot, and it was, you know, this white powdery stuff, okay? And, you know, I felt that it was just hamburger helper for booze, you know? Like, you could just, oh my God, you could drink for such long periods of time without the inconveniences of food or sleep, you know? It was really good. And your bar bill was like $900 a quarter beer night, you know? It was like crazy. But he said, you know, we'll get married. And very romantic, we'll get married. And I said, okay. And I mean, what better reason to get married than somebody asks you? So I didn't really want to have a wedding per se. I wanted to have like a going away party. But if you call it just a going away party, you're not going to get presents. So we called it a wedding. But it was really as far away from a wedding as you could picture. I'm gonna try to give you a snapshot of it, though. I wore a purple dress, and I did not invite any of my family members. My husband's parents were there, and I think they must have thought, oh my God, what has he done? What has he gotten himself into? But it was just like everybody who hung out at the Nutley pub came down to the wedding. 110 people. And they had, we did have food. They had a lovely Italian buffet. And we did have, the policy was, once you opened the half-gallon bottle of booze, you bought it. I even remember how much it was. This is back in 1979. It was $35 for the bottle. Once you cracked it open to serve it to a customer. And they informed us the next day that we had broken every record at the VFW Hall for alcohol sold. Thank gosh we were proud. But I'm going to tell you a couple little stories. One is that we had... the party favor was little bottles of Mateus wine. Anybody from the 80s here remember Mateus wine? Little party bottles of that, and then took a little ribbon, and took the ribbon and put it around it and stapled it. And you can't do a job like that with a few you got to have a few cocktails to do a job like that. So we got there 2 hours early to staple the name tags on the bottles of Mateus. And by the time the guests arrived, we were both drunk. And John Cowan, who owned the bar, was the sweetest man. He bought us a photographer. And the photographer kept trying to get us to do wedding-type stuff. Like, it's the first dance. And we're like, nah, we don't really want to dance. And he'd be like, well, how about if you cut the cake? You know, we'll cut the cake, we'll get the pictures of the cake. Oh, yeah, okay, fine. So we each get a little plate of cake. And I thought it was very funny to do things that I had seen in movies and smush the cake in my husband's face. My husband, however, thought it was a little less funny than I did because he picked up the top tier of the 3-tier cake and he hit me in the face with it so hard that I fell on my butt. I had icing in my eyelashes for a week. And I mean, all the girls kind of grabbed me and took me in the bathroom and people were taking bets. Physically taking bets on pieces of paper on how long the marriage was going to last. But we told them, right, honey, 43 years. One of the popular wedding gifts that night was little vials of things other than frozen. We call it freeze-dried alcohol, right? And we got married in January, so it was quite a bit of snow outside. And, you know, girls got to do what a girl's got to do. So you hike up that purple dress, and you go out to somebody's van in the middle of a snowstorm, and you do what you got to do, and you come back in like nothing's happened. That's normal, right? It's just insane stuff, but it's the way it was. So off we went to the Columbia, Maryland, and I was 20 years old. And I had been a waitress for 2 years, and I was just learning how to tend bar. But they told me I couldn't tend bar there until I was 21. Maryland had this law at the time where you could have beer and wine if you were 18, but if you wanted booze, you had to be 21. That's an alcoholic had to make that one up, don't you think? And so because I would have to handle booze, I wasn't allowed to actually make the drinks. So I had to be a waitress and a hostess until I turned 21. And, you know, I was like, this is going to be great because, you know, we got this new apartment, we got furniture, I've got a job, he's got a job, we'll come home, I'll do laundry, I'll make dinner, and I'll leave all those losers back there because they were the problem. And it did not take very long to find out that when I moved to Maryland, I took me with me. And I found a group of people from Glen Burnie, Maryland, that were just as bad as my New Jersey friends. And off we went to the races. Now, if there was anything that I ever really wanted in life, it was to be a mom. And I was very sincere about that. And when my husband and I planned to have our first child, I knew that I would stop drinking. I mean, of course, everyone would stop drinking if they want to give their child the best in life. And I'm very sad to report that I did not stop drinking. I drank through the pregnancies of both my children. I drank while I was nursing them. I drank while they were so little and couldn't care for themselves. And there's a special there's special shame for mothers who did that. And I am one of those mothers. And I didn't tell anybody that, not even sponsors, until I was 10 years sober because of the shame of that. But what I know today is that there might be somebody sitting here today that has that shame, and it might be lifted a little bit because you know that somebody else did it. And those two women, what happened to those incredible little girls? They are amazing women. They didn't get the start in life that they deserved, but it didn't seem to stop them. They're both special education teachers and the kind of women that if they weren't my daughters, I'd like them as friends. More about that later. But I'm going to tell you a story about when I worked at Roy's Place 2, which is no longer there, but I swear it's not my fault. And we worked for a guy who really believed in not letting the bartenders steal. And bartenders steal, that's what we do. I mean, that's like my creed was I steal. Now, I didn't really call it stealing. What I did was, I'd see a customer who had been there for a while come in the door. I'd say, hey, how you doing? This one's on me. Now, this one's not on me. I'm not paying for it. I'm giving you this for free because I know you're going to tip me good. And also, the waitresses would come down, they would say, I need a pitcher of beer. I'm supposed to ring up that pitcher of beer at $4.50 back in the day. And I don't ring it up. I put the $4.50 in my pocket. And I also drink while I'm working. I don't pay for what I'm drinking. Those are all, they call it stealing in the real world. I didn't know this. If I knew that, I wouldn't have done as bad because the 9th step was a rough one. But 10th step, I mean. Anyway, I was working in Roy's Place 2, and the guy had an amazing system that I had never seen before and I've never seen since, where the beer would have these little tabs on them, just like when you go to McDonald's and they push small, medium, and large, and it pours exactly 8 ounce, 12 ounce, 16 ounce. Had it on the beer. Took away all the artistry of my incredible bartending skills. I just pushed a button and it poured a beer. And so, how could I steal? Because the clerk went to the office and told them, you just poured a Miller Lite and you better have the money in the register. So that was a bummer. And I was working on a Friday night one time with a guy named Clark, another bartender friend of mine, and he said to me, I figured out a way to get a beer out of the system. I'm like, do tell. He said, well, I'm going to need your help. I'm going to need you to stay at the front and make sure the manager doesn't come down because it takes a while to get the beer out. I'm like, really? What do? He said, well, you take a pencil and you stick it up there ever so slightly. You turn it. If you hear the click, you're done. You have to pay for it. But if you get it in there and drizzle like it would take 17 minutes to pour a beer with this drizzle. But, a girl's got to do it. A girl's got to do it. I'm on watch for this, right? I mean, this is amazing. This is going to be a free beer. We haven't had a free beer in a while. And I'm watching front, and he's drizzling, and all of a sudden I hear him say, uh-oh. I look over, and the tap is spilling out a continuous stream. We don't have pitchers in this bar. We only had frozen mugs. So he pulled every single frozen mug out of the refrigerator. It was all stacked up. We didn't know what to do with it. So we had, started giving it out to the customers. What can we do? Each customer had 4 beers in front of them. Then word got back to the kitchen. The staff came out and they said, unless you give us beer, we're going to tell you something's going on out here. Then the waiters, the waitresses, this busboys that were barely 16, everybody's drinking the beer to try to get rid of it so we don't get found out. What ended up happening was the pencil broke off inside the tap. It broke, and the piece of the lead was stuck in there, and that tap had just been tapped not too long before that, because it was a long time before that. But that was such a fun night, and nobody got hurt. If all my stories were like that one, I wouldn't be in an AA meeting, would I? But now I'm going to have to tell you the story that I hate to tell. And this is when my daughter Meredith was about 15 months old. I worked at a bar called The Last Chance Saloon. Now, it's no longer there, but I swear it's not my fault. And Monday night was burger night. We had half-price burgers. Everybody brought their kids and their whole family in for half-price burgers. It was so annoying. But the good news was we closed at midnight instead of 2 a.m. And I got to go out. As a bartender, we closed at 2. I never got to go out on my working nights. But Mondays, I lived for. And I clean up the bar in 2 seconds flat, and out the door I run. And I go over to Lucky Ned Pepper's, my favorite drinking place. And it had blues bar, blues music, and Grand Marnier was flowing, and I was a happy, happy girl. That part of drinking, right, between drinks 3 and 5, everything is right with the world. And then boom, over to this other side where it's like a nightmare, and I'm throwing up in front of the trees in front of the bar and not knowing how I got there. Why is it that I can't ever stay in that beautiful zone? Well, this night my friend John walks in. And John he's a manager of a bar called the Hobbit's Glen Lounge. No longer there, but I swear, had nothing to do with it. He said to me, we'll go back over to the bar. When this one closes at 2, we'll go back over to the bar. I got the keys. I said, that sounds like a good idea to me. And I swear to you, I do not remember. There's such thing as blackout. Did you know that? And I didn't know. But I knew this night I remembered some things and not others. So I think it was a gray out, this very sporadic remembrances of this night. But the next thing I remember is I look at my watch and it's 6 a.m. And I've got a husband who needs to start work at 6 a.m. And I've got a 15-month-old baby that needs their mother home. And I get that feeling of dread and fear that's so strong that it sobers me up. You ever get that scared where you're just you get sober? I drove home completely fine, and I'm thinking about what I'm going to see when I open that door. And I hope I don't forget what I see, because my husband was up for about an hour already, and he had pulled the baby up out of the crib because he called the waitresses that he knew that I worked with, and they didn't know where I was. He called the hospital to see if I had gotten an accident, and he called the police station to see if I was arrested. And nobody knew where I was, so he was going to take the baby out in the car and just go looking for her mother. And when I came in the door that morning, he gave me that look. And if you're alcoholic like I'm alcoholic, people have given you that look before. It's like a mixture of hate and confusion and love and exasperation, and just, he didn't have words. He just said, what happened? And I said, well, John came over and he said, you just went to another bar and stayed there all night when I have to go to work. And I'm like, well, I really didn't have anything to say. And I just felt so low that day. I remember thinking, I'm not going to drink anymore. This is not good. I'm not going to drink. I'm a failure as Bob's wife, and I'm a failure as her mother. I'm a failure as a human being. I'm not going to drink anymore. And I was a bartender by this time full time. And I was like, well, I think there's such a thing as a sober bartender. I've never met one, but I think there's such a thing. I think I can do it. And the next day was a Tuesday, and I didn't work on Tuesdays, and it was a little quiet in my house, if you know what I mean. But the next day was Wednesday, and I was fine. I'm a bartender that doesn't drink. I'm fine. I'm making my drinks, give them to all my friends, give it to the customers. It's not fun, but it's what you got to do. You're a bartender that doesn't drink. But the next night was Thursday, and the DJ came in, and the DJ had this act where he would take all these different hats and wigs and sing along with the songs, and it annoyed the crap out of me. And I felt like I just needed 1 or 2 drinks to take the edge off. And I started thinking about, my husband get mad at me because I drink too. Who's home with the kid during the day? Me. I'm home with the kid all day long. And then I go to work and I tend bar. And if you were married to my husband, you'd drink too. And so this, I found out later, is the actual definition of insanity. Because nothing happened to change from the time that I felt lower than a whale's sperm to Thursday. Nothing changed except for my thoughts about it. And I was able to talk myself back into drinking again. And I wish I could tell you, well, it was only a short period of time, but it was another 5 years, and it was another child come into the world. And then my life became like the movie Groundhog's Day. You remember that one, right? It's like you just wake up, and it's the same day. I stopped going to any of events that my little girl had at school. My husband went. I just got through the day so that I could get back to work at night, and I could drink. And I had a plan, too, because, I could drink. If I drank too early, if I was working, I couldn't count the money in the till. So the time was 10 p.m. Oh, boy, I would just look at the clock. I started work at 5. That's a long time. I stare at the clock until 10 p.m. I could drink then and then still count the money. And then I would, drink until way, way late. And my kids would get up, 6:30, 7 in the morning. And I would resent my children. And I would resent my husband. I resented my life. And I heard a speaker once say that she was away on a trip. This is during her alcoholism. And it was a work trip. And it was a Sunday. Everybody was gathering back into the bus to get to the airport. And she said people were talking about getting back to their families and how much they had missed them. And she said, I wanted to want to go home. That's the way I felt. I wanted to want to be with my family. I wanted to want to be the mother that they needed me to be. But when alcohol was in my bloodstream, I could not do any of that. So it was just really tough times. And one day, it's a long story and I will not bore you with it, but it is a good one, and I will tell it to you personally if you come up to me. I drank my last drink on January 11th, 1989, and when I did so, I messed up the car pretty bad. And it was in pretty bad shape. And I kept thinking about, oh my God, the look I'm going to see on his face this time. Because now we've got 2 babies at home. He's going to pull them out of bed in the middle of the night. He's not going to leave them there. He's going to come and rescue me with my car. And I'm going to get that look in spades. And all of a sudden, the car was stuck in a snowbank. All of a sudden, this guy comes driving in. It's 3 in the morning. And he says, what's the matter, lady? You stuck? I said, yes. And he said, well, he had like a 4-wheel drive vehicle, and he pushed the front of his front end and my front end, and he pushed me out of the snowbank. And the whole right side was annihilated, but I could still get in the left side, and I could still drive it. And I drove it, I was only about 2 blocks away from home. I drove it up to the light, and I was thinking, man, you are so lucky. And in a cop pulls. And I was thinking, 30 seconds later, I think the cop would have stopped to say, what's all happening here? And we might have had a different speaker tonight. But he didn't see it, and he went about his business. And I went home, and I thought to myself, you know what? I think God must allot a certain amount of booze to everybody, and I just drank my last one. And that was my last drink. Now, I didn't think I was an alcoholic. Now, my father, he was an alcoholic. The vodka for breakfast guy? Yeah. And there was one thing I never drank, vodka? No, thank you. Unless it was you go to brunch and they have Bloody Marys and, screwdrivers are included. That would be alcohol abuse to not do that. Or maybe if it was a part of a cocktail that had many pieces of the mixture in it, vodka was one of them, I would make an allowance for that. Or if it's the only thing you had, that would be another reason to drink vodka. But I had this really strong vision in my head that that's what alcoholics do. They drank vodka out of paper cups for breakfast. And because I never did that, I wasn't an alcoholic. So I was a problem drinker, and that was fine. I wasn't going to drink anymore. I wasn't drinking. And sure enough, I didn't. And about 3 months into this, 3 months of not drinking and working full-time as a bartender, I one day pulled over my boss at JK's Pub which is no longer there, and I swear had nothing to do with that either. And he said, I said to my boss, who was in AA 7 years at the time, and I knew this man before he came to AA, and he was markedly different. And I said to him, Bill, I have not had a drink for 3 months. And he said, well, why? And I said, well, I don't know. He goes, like, do you think like you might be an alcoholic? Like, well, I don't know. I was going to ask you, some questions about it. And he goes, pulls out of his pocket a schedule of meetings. You people carry schedules of the meetings you go to. That sounds like a little bit over the top. And he said he would take me to the meeting. And I said, oh, I will meet you at the meeting, because I felt like a trapped animal, And I swear, I don't remember feeling as low as I did that day when I had to walk over the threshold of the AA meeting. It took a lot of courage, and I think anybody in this room knows what that feels like, to walk over that, who's going to be there, what are they going to say, what are they going to do, how are they going to judge me? And I was so shocked at the laughter that I saw in the meeting. The laughter was the thing that kept me coming back in the beginning. I was like, I think this is the not drinking place. I mean, what do they got to laugh about? But it was a kind of a laughter that started in their toes and it came on up and out. Like, it was different than regular Comedy Store laughter, and it was intriguing to me. And I looked on the wall behind the speaker, and there were these things called the steps and traditions. They read them in the meeting. I didn't understand a lot of what it said, but I did notice that there was this word God in them, and I was a little bit uncomfortable with that, because my parents were both atheists, and the only time you ever heard God spoken was if it was closely followed by the word damn. And I felt like, if I don't have any knowledge of that, am I going to be screwed here? Am I going to be in trouble? Come to find out, I'm actually in a good place. I found out about a year and a half later. I went to a meeting with my sponsor, and she said, we always go and we say thank you to the sponsor, we say thank you to the speakers after. And I go up to him, his name was Wayne. I did a beautiful talk. And Wayne, at one time, had been scheduled to be a priest when he was a young man, but he lost that opportunity due to alcohol. So when he talked about God, I naturally thought that he learned about God in those days in the priesthood. And I said that to him. I said, hi, thank you for your talk. I feel bad that I'll never have that. And he said, what do you mean? Are you new to the program? I said, well, I've been here like a year, but I don't really have an idea about this God. It says, God, as you understand him, I don't really understand. And he's like, well, you thought that I had a relationship with God that was based on what I learned. And I'm here to tell you that I had to do a lot of unlearning to get to this place where I got a higher power of my understanding. He said, if you come here with a clean slate, you don't have any bogged down stuff that you have to get rid of, think of yourself as lucky, girl, and you make this God as big as you can possibly make him. He's bigger than your biggest problem, and he is always loving, nurturing, listening, and there for you. I was like, I think I got a better deal than Wayne C. I'm pretty good. And I took the third step that day, for real. And I never had to go back and rethink God. But I'm going to fast forward, tell you what early days in sobriety were like. I didn't think I was alcoholic, so I would just go to meetings very occasionally, because if you're not really an alcoholic, you don't really need to go to meetings. So you just occasionally go, because the people that laughed had shiny eyes. They intrigued me, people with the shiny eyes. I liked them. And they would remember my name when I came back to a meeting. That was interesting. People didn't remember my name much when I went places. And I would go very occasionally to the meeting on Sunday, which was about the 12 steps, the 12 traditions, and the 12 promises. That was interesting to me. And then I would go to the Alano Club that we had in our town, very occasionally. And I was about 6 months along at this point, working at the bar, and my friend Gloria walks in the door. And if she was here, she would not mind me telling you this. Gloria and I got into some trouble back in the day. We were fast friends, running crazy. And she walked in the door, sat at the bar, and ordered a Coke. And I knew something was up. And she said, I'm sober and Alcoholics Anonymous for 2.5 years. Like, oh my God, me too. I've got 6 months. She said, that's amazing. Do you have a home group? Nah. She says, you come to my home group. Monday night Elkridge, come with me, come with me. I started going to her home group. I got a job making coffee. And you people needed me to make your coffee. You are terrible coffee makers. Did you know that? I worked in a restaurant for all my life. So you needed me. So I went, I made the coffee. And then she told me, like, did you know we give out medallions for different rents of sobriety? You just get up at the meeting. No, that's okay. I don't even remember, like, when I'm supposed to get it or anything. When 9 months came up, she remembered, and she kicked me off my chair, made me get up there and I remember it was a purple aluminum chip. And it's just so funny how those things are so important when you look back on them. A little piece of aluminum, very important. And then 11 months came, still didn't think I was an alcoholic. And the secretary of that meeting, my home group, came up to me and said, Susan, I see on the list of the home group that you will be celebrating 1 year of sobriety next month. And you will come up to the podium and tell your story. And I'm thinking to myself, I've got to get a sponsor to work all 12 steps by next month. This is not going to be good. I don't know if I can do that. And I just really, it never occurred to me that it would be my turn to do it. I just didn't think. And so I was determined, like, I'm going to go and find a sponsor. So that Sunday night meeting, I occasionally went there because there's this woman named Lolly there. And Lolly always gave such a big hug and remembered your name. And she acted like she was waiting for you to come back since the last time you were there. It turns out she does that to every newcomer, but I did not know that. I thought I was special. And she embraced me, and she said, it's our group anniversary. We've got a special speaker. Sit down and enjoy. The speaker gets up there, and she's one of those compelling speakers. Every word I'm hanging on. I cannot wait. I know that God has sent me here because he wants me to ask her to be my sponsor. So I'm trying to get up the courage at the end of the meeting, and I'm in a line. You people have to say thank you to the speaker. Long lines of people. I'm waiting, and people are trying to talk to me while I'm in the line. And you can't even hang out by the pamphlets. That is a dead giveaway. People will talk to you over there in a heartbeat. Don't go there. And I was like, people want to always talk to you. I finally get my chance to get up to her and talk to her, and she says, what's your name? And I said, Susan. She said, how long are you sober, Susan? I said, 11 months. I said, I wondered if you would be my sponsor. She said, oh, I'm sorry, what happened? Did your sponsor move away or it's not working out? I said, no, you be my first. She said, sponsor? No sponsor for 11 months, Susan? She said, what's the first step? I didn't quite remember it all. I knew it was really something unattractive. I remember something about power, unmanageable, ugly. I didn't remember it. And I told her, I'm about halfway there. I'm not really sure. And she said, I have no time for that. And she walked away. Oh, can you believe it? And I thought to myself, first thought, I could drink again, because who would blame me? I mean, so you ask somebody to be your sponsor after 10, 11 months, and they say no. That's got to be a reason. It's got to be in the book somewhere, right? But no, it's not. And I was intrigued by her fastidiousness about, if you don't know the first step, then I can't help you. I was intrigued by that. So I went home. I did have the book. If I recall, it was Blue Book. It was on the dresser. It had been a nice resting place for coffee occasionally, but it really hadn't been opened. And I looked through some of the stories in the back, and then I went to Bill's story in the front. And in Bill's story, it's a doozy, Bill's story. He talks in a different language, But one thing that he did say in there is that if you don't have the first step, then there's no other steps that would help you. And I thought that was very, very interesting. And I made up my mind. I said, okay, tomorrow night, Monday night, it's my home group. I'm going to my home group. I'm going to sit down at the table. Whatever lucky girl sits across from me, I'm asking her to be my sponsor. I don't care who she is. And it was Robin. Robin was 22 years old, college student, who had just completed the 12th step with her sponsor and was told to find somebody to help. Can you believe that? 2 prayers intersecting. And we began our journey. And she and I would meet every Friday. And she was a gentle nurturer and just what I needed to get started. But the day came when I felt like the rubber hadn't hit the road yet. And I got another sponsor. This sponsor was a nurse in the field of addiction. You could not pull anything off on this woman. I mean, she was so tough. But that's when my healing began. And that's what I want to say, is that I am so grateful that my story has this gap in it, okay? It was like this horrible time of drinking where things were horrendous and sad and lonely and isolated. And it's got this incredible time of healing and hope and love and friendship. But it has this point in the middle that I didn't drink, but I didn't do a damn thing. And I'm here to tell you that that place is worse than drinking. Because I felt like my skin was covered in broken glass. And I was irritated as all hell with everything that was happening in my life. But I wasn't drinking! So I'm actually here to report that I don't recommend it, but I'm glad it happened to me. Because I know the value of what working the program can do for a person. Anyway, I want to update you to where my life is today. I am 33 years sober. My daughter, my oldest daughter, is 40 this year. She and her husband bought a house with an in-law suite and asked my husband and I to come and live with them. I have 2 grandbabies. I get to do an amends that I wasn't the mother that they deserved, but I am the grandmother of all time. You can bet on it. And I got my little Easton and Macklin. They are so sweet, and I love them so much. And I get to do a daily amends to my family. And because they were allowing us to live in their home rent-free, I got to retire 3 years early. And I'm pretty sure you would not have that story had I could continue to drink. Can we agree on that one? So my life is amazingly good. When I was 5 years sober, I bought a 12-step gift shop. And I would take it on the road and go everywhere that I could that would have me, And my favorite place to take it was Sunlight of the Spirit, because they were so welcoming and loving. And you would set up in your room, your hotel room, just set up, and people would come and buy T-shirts, medallions, books, bumper stickers, jewelry. And we would go everywhere and anywhere. Dances, just really anything. Workshops, retreats, anything that would have us, we would go and try to make it work. And during that time of my life, that was 9 years, from the time I was 5 years sober, and when I started that, I've had a great deal of fear still about people. And if you would ask me, what are you afraid of? There was really no answer, just like everything. I had no idea why I was so afraid. I think, as I reflect on it now, the fear came from not being enough, not feeling enough, never being okay with who I was. And so I was maybe pretending to be afraid when I really was inadequate, feeling inadequate. But that job was like, whoa. It was inside of a place called the Serenity Center where we had 36 meetings a week, 9 different 12-step programs. And the shop was within that place. And people would just come pouring through the doors for meetings. We had 36 meetings a week. And I would be the first person they would see. And I had this little chair right by my register, and people would just sit there and tell me, everything. And I was like, I don't know what to tell you. I don't even know about my own life. But what I figured out, and pretty quickly too, is that people want 2 things. They want to feel loved, and they want to feel heard. So you just listen to them, and you give them a hug at the end, and you've done your job. And it was the best time of my life. That 9-year period was the best time of my life. And unfortunately, my husband came down with a neurological disorder, and he had to stop working. And so I needed to step up to the plate, get a job that paid benefits for our family, take care of our family, and I had to sell the gift shop. And it was like giving away a child. It was so painful. But it was my honor to do that. My husband had worked 2 jobs and 3 jobs at times because that gift shop didn't make any money. It was just my passion. And I took care of the family. I worked at a community college in Baltimore, and I took care of our family. I did a living amends, and I was honored to do so. What I wanted to end with was that I do this thing when speakers speak called what if. Whenever a speaker speaks, I think, what if that didn't happen? So for me, what if Gloria didn't come in that day and say, I'm sober 2.5 years, come to my home group? Because I was just right on the precipice of not going back at all. And then what if that day I didn't get brave enough to tell Bill that I thought I might have a problem and go to my first meeting? What if that didn't happen, you know? And then what if I didn't have the courage to stand up and do all the things that were asked of me when I came here? You know, I didn't believe in anything that you guys were saying. I really didn't. I mean, you look at the 12 steps, nice little principles, you know, like a lot of them look like religious little principles. They're cute, lovely, but they're not going to work for me. I mean, if you knew me, you wouldn't even ask me to do it, but okay, fine. If you want me to do it, I'll do it. So I'm here to report that you do not have to agree with it, and you do not have to want to do it. You do not have to like doing it, but you got to do it if you want to get well. That was one of the biggest reasons I found out that I was not a bad person who was trying to get good. I was a sick one trying to get well. And I'm so glad, because that changes things. That makes me understand why that mother of those 2 little girls couldn't not drink. She was so sick. And so happy I found my way here to you. You know, it's a long walk from a drug-infested bar in Nutley, New Jersey to where I stand for you today, and I could have missed it all. I think about that all the time, those what-ifs. So I encourage you to think of the what-ifs in your story and remember the people that made a difference and tell them about it. Love you all.